some people signing in. So we'll go ahead and get started probably right at the top of the hour. Welcome, everybody.
Cool.
And as everyone is joining us, if you guys wouldn't mind taking a look at the polls and help answer some questions to let us know kind of where we should be focusing more of our attention, we would definitely appreciate that. Looks like we have a number of people that need some help getting their estate planning documents started. So that's helpful. All right, well, it's 9 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome everybody to our webinar today. My name is Mary Verano and I am the marketing coordinator at Corrigan Krause. I will be guiding the discussion today. Thank you for taking the time as we go ahead and take a look at take a comprehensive look at life planning. Today, our goal is that you're going to walk away from this webinar with actionable takeaways to help plan your future and your family's future. We have 3 speakers today. We have Jen Allen, Linda Dolan from Corrigan Krause. Jen is from Williams Allen Casey LPA, and Brian Reese from Cke Financial. I'll have Linda, Jen, and Brian give a brief introduction of who they are and what they do. And then we'll go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So Linda, please get us started.
Thanks, Mary, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us bright and early. I am Linda Dolan. I'm a tax director at Corrigan Krause, and Cke is a mid-sized firm. We specialize in small business and small business planning, everything small business. I personally specialize in some of the small business, but also in estate, gift, and trust planning and working with high net worth individuals. And I'm excited about this webinar, and working with other advisors is one of my favorite ways to do planning. And it's very important. You'll hear more about that during the day.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was to say, Jen, you can go ahead.
All right. Again, as Linda said, thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Jen, and I am an attorney at Williams Allen Casey. We are an estate planning firm. That's all we do, located over in Independence. I've been an attorney for about 9 years, but 4.5 specifically here at Williams Allen Casey. I'm the lead attorney at our team that handles estate and trust settlements. So we love to work together with tax and financial advisors. And the biggest takeaway that I hope all of you hear is that it's so important to have a team working together for your plan. And as Linda stated, when that's happening, it's a really great, your plan is successful that way, right? When everyone's on the same team. So I'm happy to have you today, and thanks for joining us.
Great. All right, Brian.
Yes, thank you, Mary. So I will echo the comment that I'm very excited about this, the webinar. I feel like this sort of webinar where we're all getting together really displays how we all work together cohesively to better serve our clients. So That being said, I'm with Raymond James, Cke Financial Services. I've been a financial advisor for, about 15 years or so now. I really got into financial planning. I feel like because of the way I grew up, I'm one of 10 kids. So growing up in a household where budgeting is important and the value of hard work is really passed down to us, that really opened my eyes. I don't think I realized it when I was little, but it real opened my eyes to the importance of financial planning. And then as I got older, I learned more about investing and the stock market and growing a person's net worth. So that's how I landed in financial advising. And I really love the fact that I can help people accomplish their goals, do a better job of planning, make better financial decisions. So when I think about why I do what I do, that's exactly it, is helping people make wise financial decisions, plan for retirement, and eventually reach their goals. And Cke Financial Services is a partnership that was brought about or developed in 2019. So looking back, it was just pre-COVID, which is kind of a weird thing to say. But in 2019, we formed Cke Financial Services. It's a partnership between my Raymond James firm and Corrigan Krause. And it really came through the fact that Corrigan Krause realized that they needed or wanted to better serve their clients more holistically. And so what better way to do that than to form a financial planning firm and then partner with someone like Jen at Williams Allen Casey to round out the A team of overall financial planning. So again, excited to be here and present some ideas and some different concepts to you guys, and I'll turn it back over to Mary.
All right, thank you, everyone. Before getting started, a few housekeeping items, always exciting. We do want this to be an interactive discussion, so please use the chat feature to toss in any questions that you might have or something that you might want more clarity on. This recording and PowerPoint will be distributed to the attendees and will be available for download. Watch our social media feeds, particularly LinkedIn, and this LinkedIn event. Once we have the replay ready to go, I'll post on there so you can come back anytime and download it and have it ready for anybody else you think might benefit from it. And if you'd like this type of important information delivered directly to your inbox, please email info@corrigankrause.com to sign up for our newsletter. Okay, so to kick off our discussion, as I said, we have the polls, and you guys are very interactive already. We have a lot of responses. Looks like we do need to focus quite a bit on how to get started in our estate planning, which is great information, so thank you. All right, so the first client that we are gonna start with is going to be client A, the newlyweds. So folks that are in this type of demographic, what do these folks need to do? Brian, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Happy to. And really, when we talk about newlyweds, especially if they're the traditional newlyweds that are in their late 20s, early 30s, I feel like getting them started, getting them off to the right start with kind of the basic financial planning package is a good way to think about it. Recognizing that everybody's situation is completely different, but overall, when I'm working with someone that is a newlywed, there are a couple of things that I immediately want to talk to them about. But we'll start with running the financial plan and getting a gauge on where they're at with their current planning and the direction they want to go. So when someone is 28 years old, they really don't, most of the time, they don't really know where they want to be when they're 65. But it's a good time to set the groundwork for where they're at and where they're headed. So the financial plan is of the utmost importance to get started. And you'll hear that as kind of a common theme throughout getting started with the financial plan. But from there, one of the first things we look at is the 401k plan. So most people that are working have the 401k as an option. So I want to make sure, in most cases, that the couple is maxing out their 401k to at least get all of the matching contribution. And anybody that's a little bit older has probably heard that when you're younger, small changes can make a substantial difference when it comes to your long-term retirement savings. So just as an example, with a young couple, just bumping up their 401k contribution a couple percent, and I ran some numbers on this, but saving 2% more over a 30 or 35-year time period with some other assumptions built in can make a $250,000, $300,000, $350,000 difference. So small changes early on definitely can make a big change in the long term. And when I'm talking to a lot of people in this category, saving a little bit more is definitely doable. So I want to make sure they're getting all the free money. So make sure they're saving up to the matching contribution. If they can do more, that's great, but that's step number one. Number two, for this couple, the 30 and 28-year-old, number two is making sure that they have the proper amount of life insurance. A lot of times term insurance is completely fine for them. For a lot of younger people, there isn't too much of a need of permanent life insurance. Simple 20 or 30-year term policies make sense. For anybody that's a non-tobacco user and pretty healthy, I mean, a 30-year-old getting a $750,000 term life policy for a guy, ballpark $500 a year, for a woman, $400 a year. So it doesn't have to break the bank, but I want to make sure that someone, a newlywed, where they're now responsible financially for someone else, to make sure that they have the proper amount of life insurance. That gets even more important once kids come into play. The third part is, from the investment standpoint, the third part is if they're saving up to the match and now they can still save additional money for retirement, that's where we typically can turn to a Roth IRA and have them start saving money into a Roth IRA, which will start building up the tax-free retirement income source, especially if they're doing pre-tax contributions into the 401k and getting the pre-tax matching contribution, doing the Roth IRA and building the tax-free pool of money is a great idea in most cases. So the idea there is if a 30-year-old starts saving $200 a month and invest that for the next 35 years, that puts them on track to have, again, with some assumptions built in, $350,000, $400,000 of tax-free retirement income. So that when I think about the basic financial planning package to get people started, make sure you're getting the match, make sure you have the proper amount of term life insurance, and then getting the Roth IRA going. The other thing I'll add real quick is this is the most typical age group demographic to still have student loan debt. And one of the things in the financial planning practice that I always focus on for them is the student loan debt and how much they're paying, and does consolidation make sense? So we've got a really, really good local downtown Cleveland firm that was started up about probably 5 years ago. That's exactly what they do, is they offer really competitive rates to consolidate student loan debt, and they're local. So we definitely want to look at that. And then the last thing is reviewing workplace benefits. So I want to make sure that if there is additional life insurance that they can get through their employer that's reasonably priced, we look at that. Do they have short-term and long-term disability? We want to review that just in case they can't work. And in some cases, there's the need to get an additional personal disability policy, but we kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. So there's a lot of things. In summary, for the financial planning part of it, there's a lot of things that we can do in order to get the foundation set for this newlywed couple and get them to together talk about their finances and make sure there's nothing that's being hidden, whether it's on purpose or not. Everything's out in the open. The financial plan is in place, And then we review that plan annually to make sure that they're staying on track, so that, once they get busy, start having kids and the craziness of life, they'll know that the financial plan is there for them. They don't have to worry about it.
Right. All right, Linda, do you think you can talk about the tax considerations that these newlyweds might need to think about?
Yes. So typically for us, newlyweds are pretty easy because they're typically W-2 earners, pretty simple tax returns. Usually doing it themselves on TurboTax. But if we were to have somebody referred to us that's a newlywed, we'd be looking at prior year tax returns, making sure there were no mistakes, and if there were, kind of correcting them. A lot of times it's cleaning up their city issues that they referred to us, or get a notice, that kind of thing. And then the other thing we would be doing is planning for withholding, maybe guiding them, saying you need to increase, decrease your withholding. Sometimes doing a full-blown tax planner, different than the financial plan, but doing a tax planner, if they had a year of a bonus or something substantial going on, or even maybe we're having a child. I've done planners before about looking at somebody wanting to start to stay at home and what the impact would be for that. Again, with this A-team concept with your financial planner attorney, you're going to hear some of the same things from both ends. And one thing that's really important is make sure you're taking all your benefits, not leaving anything on the table. Like Brian said, making sure you're at least getting the match on your 401k. If you have a HSA, taking advantage of that. If you have a flexible savings account. So we'd be watching those kind of things. And then obviously preparing your yearly tax returns, that goes with the territory, right? When we're doing that though, we're also looking and checking how things are titled. Are they held by the spouse or the taxpayer? Are they held jointly? And a lot of times I'll ask too, do you have any beneficiaries listed? Do you have contingent beneficiaries? And when we get into those kind of discussions, that's when oftentimes I'll make a referral over to somebody like Jen to really say, hey, you don't have estate documents in place. You really need to get this together. So Jen, so that would be, that's one thing too with the beneficiaries. It's really important when you get married. You don't want to have maybe your mom or dad on your life insurance. Still, you'd want to have your new spouse, ideally, right?
So, ideally. Yeah.
So that, so I would refer a client then over to Jen for estate planning.
Right. And so again, as you watched today, we really work together. And so not many 30 and 20-year-olds are starting with their estate plan and wanting to get their documents in order, right? Over 60% of people don't have any plans in place. And the 40% that do are usually outdated, right? So estate planning is not the topic of discussion that most people want to dive into. But in the midst of talking with Brian and then Linda, it's really important for all of you to understand that how an asset is titled directly correlates to what happens when you pass away. And so for us here at our firm, we spend a significant amount of time explaining to our clients what joint ownership means, looking at your house deed. Is it in joint survivorship? It's not automatically put in joint survivorship, and sometimes you don't realize what that means. And so educating about how an asset's owned and what happens with that asset if someone does either become disabled. When I say disabled, I talk about the marbles test, right? Is do you have enough marbles to handle your finances? And so disabled or when you pass away. So talking about asset ownership, talking about beneficiary designations, and also explaining the difference between a will-based plan and a trust-based plan. I can't tell you what makes the difference with that, but just because you're younger doesn't mean that a trust might not make sense. It depends on what's going on with your life, as well as what your goals and objectives are. So educating about the difference between a will or a trust. But if you are doing a will-based plan, then it's even more important to look at your beneficiary designations and make sure that those are updated. Right now, maybe there's not kids, but there could be kids in the future. And so, or if there are kids at this time, we're going to be talking about guardianship issues and what that looks like and how we can structure if a really bad event happens and someone has to take over care of the kids. And so For me, I spend a lot of time educating, right? So because there's so much information out there, what's real, what's not real, and trying to help you make educated decisions about what makes sense in your life at this time. And I do not see, and anyone here on the team presenting today, estate planning is not an event, right? A lot of times, because it's such a big deal to get documents in order, people feel like, whew, I did that and now it's done. Estate planning really is an ongoing conversation that needs to happen. And so even if you do some estate planning here, I tell people just think about the next 2 to 5 years. What does that look like? Because at least minimally every 5 years, you should review and update your estate planning documents. And so that's the conversation that I'm normally having with this demographic of people. And and we work together as a team and communicate back and forth between Brian and Linda about what makes the most sense so that we're all on the same page.
Right. That is quite a bit to think about for folks coming back from their honeymoons. So moving forward, after the honeymoon phase, of course, we are hitting mid-career. Linda, can you get us started on what our mid-career clients should be focusing on?
Sure. Is this because I'm old?
No. Never would I say such a thing.
So yeah, typically people come to us in their mid-career, maybe have a little bit more going on, not necessarily 2 W-2 earners. Somebody may own a business. So that in that case, we're preparing tax returns for personal and business. We're definitely looking, if there's a business, about planning, looking at withholding, possibly doing some bonuses, looking at paying estimates, those kind of things. And then if there's an S Corp involved, we typically will change the mix between distributions and salary, just to do some tax savings there on maybe some SE tax. And then making sure at that point, you're not just matching your 401k or your retirement contributions, but you're not matching what the employer puts in, but actually maxing it out and putting in, if you're over 50, you can put in the catch-up contribution as well. So that's really important because you want to start thinking about, even though you're in mid-career, about your retirement. So we'd also be looking and possibly suggesting some additional deductions that you can take. If you have a business as well, a home office, and maybe SE health insurance, self-employed health insurance would be important to look at. Sometimes we can have you, if you have a business that's, really running, really making money, you can hire your children, start contributing to a Roth IRA for them if they're working in the business in some fashion. Sometimes they're a model for the website. And then we would be looking to possibly beginning backdoor Roth IRA contributions. If you're making too much, you can't put money into a Roth, but there's a way to do it if you don't have any IRAs that are out there already that are pre-tax. You're able to do backdoor, meaning you put it into a non-deductible IRA and then roll it immediately to a Roth to get that other bucket of money that Brian talks about going. So, when you eventually retire, you'll have your deferred money that you still have to pay tax on, and then the Roth you can pull it out and not have to pay tax on, which is really important in retirement. And then how to use your 529 plans if you've saved them up, hopefully. Versus a scholarship if your child gets one, and the importance of, you may want to take money out if your kid has out of a 529 plan if they did get a scholarship. And then there's education credits that you want to maximize. So that's important too. And that all comes into play with, the money, the salary you're taking out of your business could affect that. If you take too much, it could wipe you out of getting those credits potentially. So we watch that. And then we do help with Fafsa Consulting, when people are applying to get student loan aid, we will help with that. And again, really important, always looking at assets and titling. And these are the years where we usually see outdated plans. And then a lot of times I'll see people that have revocable living trusts, but they have nothing titled to that trust. So that's an important thing that we'll tend to catch. And when we catch that, then we refer it over to Jen and say, hey, get your stuff updated.
Right. And so when we're talking about a trust is really just a box. And that's probably an oversimplification, but it's the best way for me to explain it. And with that box, the only way that box accomplishes what you want it to do is to make sure that you actually retitle and place your assets inside that box. So what we call trust funding is really important. At this time, when we're getting clients referred to us or maybe coming to us to do their estate planning, they do have wills in place or a unfunded revocable living trust. Because, back when they were newlyweds or had kids, they were concerned about making sure there were guardians for the kids. That's usually a triggering event that makes people think about their estate plan. So on average, documents are updated, and we did our own internal study. And every time I look at documents that were already done, it's about 19.2 years where documents have been updated. There are usually significant changes, not even, yes, in your personal life, but also in the world of tax and legal language, right? That has been updated in the last 20 years. So important to review those. If a trust is not funded and assets are not titled into that trust, that can be fixed. And so we spend a lot of time looking at, what do you own and how is it owned? And it's important that you review that because people just don't understand about asset ownership. And with a trust, the title of an asset, so how it's owned, trumps whatever your will or your trust says. So it's important to make sure that everything's working together. At this point, the adult children, kids are around that age now usually, are usually starting to step into some of those, what we call helper roles, with either backup trustees or executors or healthcare power attorneys. So we're looking at what does that mean and when is that appropriate transition to adult children, the backup roles. And we do a lot of education and looking at how are we protecting you? We call it family protection planning. And this is for you clients during those disability situations where maybe you want to make sure that as you are no longer able to handle your finances, that the right people are stepping in. I find that disability planning has become even more important nowadays because people are living longer, but not necessarily able to handle their finances for that time, right? And so that could also be a significant portion of our discussions, as well as what happens with your assets when you pass away and how is that, what type of protections are available for your beneficiaries so that the money that they inherit is not attached by any type of creditor or predator. And so there's a lot of really, I think, interesting and creative ways where we can make sure that your beneficiaries have access to the funds, but also that they are educated about how to use those funds and to not lose those assets to a bad event that may happen, and hopefully not, but that we can plan around for your beneficiaries. And so education is a big component with people during this time. And when then we are looking at this plan, it provides a great opportunity because we are asking for what do you own and how you own it. If there's any need for, and there usually is, if there's not already a financial advisor a part of the team to look at, are these investments doing what you want them to do? Do you really need 29 CDs at a bank? Like, do you know what you're doing here, right? And so at this point, we would refer to Brian and say, hey, Brian, we know everything that they own, obviously with the client's permission, but would you take a look at this? Can you help them make sure that they're still trying to accomplish their goals? And so at that point, we pass it off to Brian.
Yep. Thanks, Jen. And I feel like a lot of people, whether you think you're a sophisticated investor or not, most people have heard of asset allocation or even know what asset allocation is. And that's clearly very important. But the other part of it is asset location. So I've got a new client to me who has way too much money in cash. and they know they've got way too much money, literally in cash, literally earning zero. So they came to me, and part of the conversation was, what should we do with this pile of cash? It's a great problem to have, but
Really?
what should we do with this pile of cash that we've been accumulating over the last 5 or 6 years? And so that's where we get to asset location. So is it best served to keep all that cash earning zero? When do they need the money? What are their plans for the money? And then we can start coming up with some solutions on how to get money working harder for them. And so earning zero is not an optimal idea. So then it's a matter of what type of an account do we put some of this money to work in, and then we get to the asset allocation. How do we invest it? But that's a really important idea that a lot of people don't really, or aren't really familiar with, the asset location part of it. So a lot of what I'll say probably ties in really closely with what was already said. But when we've got a couple that are mid-career in their, call it around 50 years of age, hopefully they've been doing a lot of these things over the years. Yeah, they need to update their estate plan, and yeah, they want to make sure beneficiaries are in place. But a lot of these people have done some of these things already and have saved money for retirement for the better part of 20 or 25 years. So a lot of times they have already accumulated a pretty nice amount of money, especially in retirement accounts. So when I get together with these people, or these types of people, it's, again, financial plan. If they haven't run one ever, then let's do that and take inventory of where they're at and where they're headed, and then see what needs to be changed. If they've never worked with a financial advisor, which is, I don't think it's that uncommon, especially when somebody, let's say they're 49 or 53 years old and they haven't changed jobs very often. If they've worked at the same place for the better part of their career, a lot of times they've just saved in their 401k and just keep pumping money in there and have never sat down with somebody to take a look at their overall planning. So for those people, it's really important to run the plan and see where they're at and where they're headed. But as long as they're doing a good job of saving money, earning money, saving money, and budgeting, Linda already said this, but making sure that they max out their 401k contributions. So somebody that's 53, they can put $26,000 into their 401k this year. Somebody that's 49 can do $19,500. So making sure that if it makes sense, make sure that they are maxing out their 401k contribution. If they've got a high deductible healthcare account through work and an HSA, HSAs are a great way to save money for healthcare expenses, of course, but also for retirement income beyond the age of 65. It will provide tax-free income similar to a Roth IRA for healthcare and later on potentially for retirement. So maxing out, again, when it makes sense, maxing out an HSA account can make really good sense. And I'm not sure if most people recognize the fact that you can invest that HSA money. So I think a lot of people think about the HSA as a way to save account. It's a health savings account. They don't think about it as a health savings investment account. So some money should stay in cash, because if you know you're going to need money out of the HSA in any given year, especially if you've got kids, that money probably stays in cash. But if you've done a good job of saving money into the HSA, and you've got, say, 1 year's worth of money saved in there, getting the rest invested for the long term makes perfectly good sense. So you think about the stock market, the returns that we've seen, generally speaking, over the last 10 or 12 years, and money that's been invested in the market and within the HSA largely has done really well. So again, somebody in this age group, I'm making sure they're maxing out 401ks. If they've got HSA, make sure they're investing there. And then going back to the allocation, it's important to have the proper asset allocation when you're starting out and you've got $10,000. But if you're 53 and now you have $500,000 saved for retirement, it's even more important to make sure that you're investing properly. And anybody that hasn't worked with a financial advisor, or some of these people, they chose their 401k allocation 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and a lot of times it's never been changed. So taking a risk profile quiz to see how much risk they should be taking and then reallocating is super important. I mentioned how good overall the stock market's been. At some point, it may not be going so well. So again, making sure that the asset allocation is right for all of us, but for these people, this age group is vitally important. And then the college savings, I think, as Linda said too, the FAFSA planning, the college savings. I think the point around all of that is just one, leading up to college, to make sure people are doing a good job of planning and saving for their kids' college, if that's important to them. And then while they're in college, make sure that we're using the money in the best way possible. Using the FAFSA, using 529 money where it makes sense, just making sure that we are having those continued conversations with clients as their children are entering and going through college. But yeah, I think very important. And again, I think overall this age group, I think it's maximizing their investment accounts, making sure their asset allocation is appropriate, and making sure that they're putting their money to work, or they're allowing us to help them put their money to work in the right sort of investment accounts, and the right sort of investments.
All right. That is a lot of great information. We did have a question come in about the HSAs. So HSAs are often part of benefit packages across the board. When is the right time to really focus on the HSA, pretty much? Because I know there's a lot of other buckets, especially for those in like the newlywed or emerging adult demographics. But when should folks start maybe thinking about using a tool like an HSA?
I think it's as early as the newlyweds. If it's available to them through their employer, I think they start putting, I think for most people, they start putting money into the HSA right away. Now, for most people, it's going to take a while until that account really builds up, because each HSA provider is different as far as when. Number one, not all of them allow you to invest the money. So so
that's the first question that folks should be asking.
Yeah, so some HSA providers, it's literally just a place to save money. Some HSA providers do allow you to invest. And so again, you get going early on, or as you start saving money. And at some point, there's no magical amount, but at some point we start talking about investing some of that money.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, moving forward, we have the next client here, the folks nearing retirement. Jen, where does someone thinking about retirement start? They've now cleaned up their estate planning over the last, hopefully fewer than 20 years. What do they do next?
Yeah, so for me, I see people that at this stage, if this is my first time meeting with them, or sometimes this is the first time people are like, I really need to get my estate planning in order too. And the reason for that is there are just normal life events that we kind of say are triggering events that make people think about this. So and decide, I know I really don't like to talk about death and dying, but it's inevitable for all of us, right? And so, but at this stage, people are starting to deal with aging parents, or deaths in their own family. And also if they have accumulated wealth, or now they know who we're leaving their assets to, and Do any of their kids have issues that they want to plan around? Or even if they don't, they just want to make sure that when they do pass, that their estate plan is set up in such a way that it does not hurt their family because of it being such a mess, right? So at this point, again, people are coming in and it feels more real because we are planning for something that seems sooner than when, you're 28 or, around the newlywed, like when we started. It all goes back to, and I feel like I'm being a little bit repetitive in everything I say at each stage, but it really is the same conversation that we're having, and we're educating about what's the difference between a will-based plan and what does a will-based plan really mean? A will-based plan means that unless you've made sure that everything is, has a beneficiary designation or is in joint ownership, and there are pros and cons to both of those ways of having assets titled. Unless you have that, a will-based plan guarantees probate. People don't realize that. People think, oh, I have a will and everything's taken care of through the probate court. And most people don't want to go through the probate court process if they don't need to. And once they understand what that means, what attorneys do not do a great job at is explaining what types of fees are associated with settlement and winding down affairs. So we spend a significant amount of time explaining, okay, maybe an attorney drafted a will for this amount of money, but they didn't go in and help you make sure that there's a beneficiary designation on your house. And now your house is guaranteed to go through probate. So explaining the difference between a will-based plan and then talking about a trust-based plan. Usually a trust is going to solve a lot of the issues that people have and want to plan around. Again, it's all about education for us and what makes the most sense. Just yesterday, I had a client come in. I thought it was going to be a will-based plan, but as we're talking about it, they don't have a large estate, but what they want to accomplish can only, easily be accomplished through a trust-based plan and what that looks like. So we're spending a lot of time educating about options and helping people. I say it's similar to an eye doctor, right? So it's what's best, option 1, 2, and it's our goal to guide in educated ways. So reviewing assets and ownerships. I can't say this enough, and I know Linda and Brian will both say, is that how an asset is owned is important. I can't tell you how many times a spouse thought they were on an investment account, but they weren't, or beneficiary designations were never updated with a deceased relative, and it triggers probate when those things aren't updated. At this point, we're talking about wealth reception. So we can transfer, wealth from one generation to the next, but what happens with that wealth with a beneficiary or with a grandkid, maybe grandchildren are now part of this plan. How do we structure it so that these beneficiaries receive education about managing this wealth so that it's not something that when people receive money, that they don't spend it? There's studies out there that say when someone inherits money, it's gone within 18 months. Well, how do we stop that? And our studies show that it's not by age. So a lot of times you'll see in documents staggered distributions. You're going to get a third at 25, a third at 30, a third at 35. Well, newsflash, age doesn't make us all smarter, right? Unfortunately, I wish it did. But what we do know is that education is what helps people make better decisions. So what if before you have access to money, you need to sit down with Brian and get a financial plan and understand budgeting? What if you have to sit down with Linda and understand the tax ramifications of your decisions? And what we have found is that beneficiaries really appreciate, and when I say force, being a little bit nudged to get this education so that they're making wise choices. And so at this point, that's part of the conversations that we're having. We spend a significant amount of time of who are we planning for? Most people have more than just the money assets that they want to transfer. They're talking about, how do I transfer my legacy and the things that I've learned over life? And so it's not just about the assets, and we can plan around that, but for us, it's just bigger than that. Who are we planning for? What charities do we want to make sure we're still, helping? And then ultimately, what are the protections there available for beneficiaries, so that if my adult child gets a divorce, I don't want that attached in their divorce. Or if there's any type of bad event that happens, how do I protect that for them? We find that once educated, clients like the option of not forcing outright distributions to their kids, but providing some flexibility and protections for them. And so we spend a significant amount of time discussing that. And because of how we're looking at it from the standpoint of, tell us everything you own, we have to make sure everything's funded into your box or has beneficiary designations. At this point, very regularly, if they're not working with a financial advisor, I'm saying you need to talk to someone so that you can have a financial quarterback, making sure that you're just doing the right things. And so at this point, I then pass it on to Brian and say, hey, Brian, they need to talk to you and have a good understanding of what their assets are doing and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yep. Thanks, Jen. And so for whoever wins the Fafsa Million tonight, don't blow that money. Don't blow that money in the next 18 months.
So with a lot of money, it usually takes just a little bit longer, but it's still going to be gone. Hopefully not. But yeah, we've done plans for 7 lotto winners, and it's all the same. They're all waiting for their next distribution because they're not educated about how to handle it. So that's another topic for another day. But
I smell another webinar for the Fafsa Millions winners.
Right. All right. Thanks, Jen. So for this age group, if they've done a pretty good job of planning, it's updating the financial plan. It's vitally important now, especially if they're business owners and they're looking to sell the business or business succession overall, whether that's involving kids, grandkids, whatever that transition is going to look like. Ideally, they're working closely with us. And I think from getting a lump sum of money, it's making sure from an estate planning standpoint that they're protecting the money and accomplishing the goals that they want to accomplish. And so that some of that might be just living a great retirement lifestyle. If that's the goal, we'll help them with that. If it's gifting money to charity, well, there's really unique ways of doing that. Or if they plan on passing money to kids and grandkids or whomever they want, there's ways of doing that as well. So making sure that we're all on the same page with what the goal is with that lump sum money. The other part of it is working with Linda and Corrigan Krause, again, for a business owner that wants to sell the business valuation. So I'll let Linda talk more about that, but that's super important for a lot of reasons. But when it comes to, again, the money, the business valuation, getting a fair value out of the business, and then what do you do with that lump sum of money? So again, just making sure that we are all on the same page with that part of it. All those goals that we had established over the years, remember the newlyweds, we start talking about the goals 35 years from now. Well, now those newlyweds are now 65, and a lot has changed for most people over that 30 or 35 years. So where are we now? And have the goals changed? And how important is healthcare at this point, depending upon someone's or a couple's health? So it's reassessing goals as they're getting ready to retire, running the financial plan, not so much anymore to see how much they're going to have for retirement. Now it's answering the question of how long is it going to last? And the worst case scenario, I think one of people's largest fears beyond public speaking is running out of money. I mean, because what's worse than pick an age, 85 and healthy and having no money left? So making sure the plan allows for proper amounts of distributions, but making sure the money lasts for as long as we think it needs to last. The other couple of things that we do for clients in this kind of age group is start running the Social Security analysis. So people that have done really well, Social Security is less important, right? I mean, if you're selling your business for $10 million, Social Security it's not a huge deal versus somebody that never made any more than $50,000. I mean, Social Security is pretty darn important in most cases, but running that analysis to show a break-even point, should you collect Social Security at 62, 65, 67, continuing to run those to see when the optimal time will be to collect Social Security. And there's a lot of questions around Social Security. I think there's just generally a misunderstanding about how it works and why. We do a really good job on the planning, but also recognizing that there are people out there that's all they do. So pointing clients to the Social Security Administration, get it right from the horse's mouth kind of thing. So making sure that people are aware that those places are open, and I think allowing people to walk in due to COVID, or maybe they will be again soon. The other part of it is Medicare. So when somebody is turning 65, they start getting all that stuff in the mail for Medicare. And unless you do a lot of research, you have no idea what you're supposed to do. So we, through Raymond James, we've got licensed Medicare specialists. So when I've got a client that's 64 and a half, we call the Medicare specialist together. I hand it off to them. I usually will jump out of the conversation, let them go through all of their stuff, what medications they're on, their health, and so forth. And our licensed Medicare specialist will help them to develop a game plan around what Medicare plan or plans they go with. So Social Security, Medicare, super important, and I think highly misunderstood. And then overall, kind of circling back to the asset allocation and making sure money lasts. I want to make sure for this couple, no matter how much money, make sure that the money fits the plan and the money lasts. One mistake some people make or think about making is becoming too conservative just because they're 65 years old. Because if family history tells you, if you've got parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents that have lived to be 90, 95, 100 years old, there's a good chance that you might make it that far. So we don't want to become too conservative with some of the money. And a lot of times that means taking a 3-bucket approach to investing. So 1 bucket of money, and we figure out how much should go in each bucket, but 1 bucket being literally cash or cash equivalents. That's money that you're going to live on in the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years. We don't want to put that money at risk. That's liquid type money that's going to be distributed to you. Second bucket, a little bit more aggressive. That's money for 5 to 10 years out. And then a longer term bucket, which for some people, it's hard to think longer term when you're 65. Some people are like, well, how much longer term is there? But if you need money when you're 85 or 90, I mean, that's 20, 25 years. So that bucket, it may be smaller, but that bucket still should be invested a little bit more aggressive, trying to get it to grow a little bit more. So I feel like when it comes to the allocation for this couple, again, no matter how much money they've got, it's from an investment standpoint, is making sure we're taking the proper amount of risk, not becoming too conservative, and investing so that a portion of the money will continue to grow into and throughout retirement. And then, so how do we incorporate the tax planning? I think where I'll turn it to Linda is when we've got a business owner, one of the first kind of triggers in my mind is that business valuation, to properly value the business and then start talking more about the succession planning.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So yeah, we would take, we have an approach at Corrigan Krause. We have a business valuation department, and they would run reports depending on what the plan is. To Brian's point, it could be just when succession planning could be gifting it to the kids, or it could be selling it outright. So there's different methods for the valuation that our department would use. So that's something that we would take over and handle and know usually ahead of time, and also hopefully, get that business healthy enough for sale too. So there's some things that you can do to get that valuation price higher. The other things we would do for a 65 and 61-year-old couple is looking at gifting strategies, particularly, maybe they have sold the business already, or maybe they're getting ready to sell the business, but you can give $15,000 per person per year right now. That's today's rule. And then you can also put money into a 529 plan. Now this couple has grandkids, so you could do a lump sum 529 plan contribution with filing one gift tax return and putting $70,000 in that covers 5 years. So that's something I see a lot of people this age that have the cash to do it, they will do. And then we talk about charity planning, especially if there's a year of income. If there's this triggering event where you're going to sell the business, that's a perfect opportunity to maybe set up a donor advised fund with Brian, or maybe just do a larger cash contribution or stock contribution, potentially, if you have some appreciated stock, to a charity to offset some of the income that you're going to be getting from selling the business. And we'd also look at, where we're at with insurance. Sometimes you're insured under the business, and we need to look and make sure if you still need insurance, possibly take that insurance with you or get insured in another way. We want to make sure if you're going to be selling business too, that you're maxing out your HSAs and 401ks, because it's your last year to have them. So you'd want to make sure that you got the max in there. And then once somebody is retired, the big thing that we're looking at that I'm doing constantly is running projections and saying, okay, now you have the opportunity between the time that you're retiring, selling your business, and potentially pulling RMDs from your IRAs, required minimum distributions, which are now at 72, or you're taking Social Security. You have just a small area of years that you can possibly take some of that 401k money that you've accumulated and convert it to Roth IRAs and take advantage of low rates. So that's something that, like, Brian and I would be coordinating together and quarterbacking together. And to Brian's point, looking at when to start taking Social Security, that's always a big question, and kind of running those scenarios, and it's not a one size fits all answer. So you have to look at it. So those are the kind of things that we would be looking at.
Right. This has been a lot of great information. And Jen, you unintentionally answered a question that we had about why you would choose a trust-based versus will-based approach. So thank you for doing that, because that was going to be asked of you anyway. So in the final minutes here, I wanted to go over maybe some of the major pitfalls, maybe like the top 3 or 4 that you guys regularly see from your clients. And we can start with Brian this time.
Yeah. So number one is, this really goes back to the younger couple. It can be of any age, but not getting the right amount of life insurance. Most people don't want to talk about life insurance, or some of the estate planning stuff they don't want to talk about, but it's making sure that people get the proper amount of life insurance. That's number one. Number 2 is maybe more midlife, but when people don't consolidate old retirement accounts. So I talked to somebody late last week who is in that middle age kind of area, who's got 4 old 401k plans that they don't keep track of. They don't get account statements. They never rebalance the accounts. So when I see that, the first thing I talk about is consolidation. Get it all in one place. We'll manage it appropriately, take the right amount of risk, update it regularly. So I see it all the time. So life insurance, get enough, consolidate old retirement accounts.
Right. Linda, what about you?
I definitely pick up a lot of clients that didn't take their required minimum distributions properly, and we have to go back and correct that. And it's a pretty simple fix, but that's something that we see often and fix. I also see people that are filing separately with their spouse that have put money into Roths, and that's kind of a no-no unless you make it less than $10,000. So that's something that we're looking at and fixing. And then another thing, very common to see assets in a deceased person's social security number. So people are providing their documents and, here's my brokerage account, and you're like, this doesn't match to anything. Oh, that's Uncle Harry. He left that to us. Well, you got to get that fixed, because should something happen to you, then it's going to be completely lost and really hard to fix. And I see it a lot with deceased spouse too, just getting them to actually go through, and unfortunately that means probate, but unfortunately, fix it and get it into the right name and social security number.
All right, Jen.
Outdated estate planning documents, unfunded and empty trusts, and people who are do-it-themselfers. So those are my top 3.
Oh no, you don't want people doing it themselves. If we've learned nothing today, there's a lot of things to consider for sure. All right, those were great, guys. All right, in the final minutes here, I really want to thank Jen, Brian, and Linda for speaking today. This was an incredible amount of information. Again, we're going to have this replay available next week, hopefully earlier, but definitely by next week. And we are, let me get their email addresses up. Jen, Linda, and Brian are more than happy to answer any questions, schedule time. Anybody that's listening, please contact us. We want to help. That is definitely a passion of all 3 and everybody involved at Corrigan Krause, to be sure. And just to let everybody know on the call, we are going to be doing 2 more kind of life planning events. So mark your calendars for August 4th. The next installment of this life planning trilogy will involve the specific triggers and the transitions that you'll need to contact a team like Jen, Brian, and Linda. So again, thanks again. Check us out on social media, especially on LinkedIn, for all of our updates and to make sure that you are signing up to attend all of our future events. So again, thank you, Jen, Brian, and Linda, and everybody for joining us today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.